Hello, everybody. Welcome to Enbreezen, the daily current affairs session of Team Enlight. Today, we'll be covering 5 topics as part of the session. They are urban flooding, the CAA and NRC, ASTI, that is the Advertising Standards Council of India, OPEC, that is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, as well as the concept of swing pricing. The first topic that we'll be dealing with today is the concept of urban flooding. Urban flooding will be looked at from a mains perspective as it has deep linkages with our GS1 syllabus in its geography part and the GS3 syllabus in its disaster management part. Urban flooding seems to be a favorite area of the UPSC as questions on the topic were asked both in the 2016 GS1 as well as GS3 examination, as well as a question on urban flooding in the 2020 Civil Services mains examination. So let's look at the concept of urban flooding in a bit of detail. So why has the concept of urban flooding, wherein urban areas get flooded, particularly during the monsoon months, been in the news recently? It is because of the urban floods that were reported from Mumbai in the past week that we have seen large news coverage for the same. But Mumbai is not experiencing urban flooding for the first time, and neither is Mumbai the first city in India to experience urban flooding. We have already seen events such as the 2015 Chennai floods, as well as floods in major Indian cities like Pune and Hyderabad in the recent past. So, what are the main causes that lead to urban flooding? We can say that it is a combination of multiple factors that cause urban flooding. Prime among them would be extreme weather events, such as heavy rainfall in a very short period of time and storm surges that happen along India's coastal cities during the cyclonic season. In addition to that, we most definitely have to mention the undercapacity of our stormwater drainage system to handle this increase in flow of water, as well as the unplanned urbanization, which has led to encroachment of our wetlands, which used to act as shock absorbers during time of excess rainfall. We can also make a mention about the phenomenon of global warming here, because global warming has aggravated such extreme weather events, and this has indirectly contributed to increased frequency of urban flooding. So, having looked at the causes of urban flooding, let's move on to some of the impacts of urban flooding. Foremost among the negative impacts of urban flooding would be the loss of innocent human lives. For example, during the Mumbai floods that happened last week, a landslide led to the death of people in, uh, in the Mumbai suburb. In addition to that, urban floods often lead to destruction of houses and have an impact on the infrastructure in a city, such as throwing the transport system out of gear, as well as even compromising the water supply in a city, as was seen in Mumbai recently. In addition to that, during times of urban flooding, wastewater gets circulated rampantly throughout the city, and this often contributes to infections and the breakout of epidemics. So, the impacts of urban flooding can be said to be manifold. Now, let's take a look at some of the steps that have been taken in order to deal with the problem of urban flooding. Following heavy floods in Mumbai and other cities in the first decade of the 21st century, the National Disaster Management Authority, that's the NDMA, came out with guidelines on management of urban flooding, which looks at a holistic perspective of how to prevent urban floods as well as how to deal with urban floods once a flooding event has occurred. In addition to that, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has come out with a stormwater drainage manual on how to manage our stormwater drainage systems properly. So, what are the different steps that we need to take going forward? One of the major steps that we need to take would be to identify flood prone areas so that people from such areas can be rehabilitated to other areas in the city. Also, we need to improve our weather forecasting systems so that we can predict such extreme weather events in advance and take steps to relocate people to safer locations in such during such extreme weather events. Also, mention should be made on having planned urbanization, wherein urban buildings should not come on top of wetlands. And before constructing major buildings, the environmental impact assessment has to be conducted. So, taking such steps can help reduce the problems that are created by urban flooding. So, urban flooding is a straightforward topic. I have not covered all the aspects of urban flooding. There are more number of impacts that urban flooding creates. There are more number of uh, steps that can be taken to alleviate urban flooding's impact. Second topic for the day is the controversial issues of CAA and NRC. So there was a news report in today's newspaper about comments that were made about the CAA and NRC by the RSS chief. So let's look at the CAA and NRC in a bit of detail. So we'll start off with by looking at CAA. So what is the CAA? The CAA, or the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, was passed by the Indian Parliament in December of 2019 in order to amend the Citizenship Act of 1955. So, as you would know, in the Indian Constitution, although Article 5 to Article 11 deals with the question of citizenship, there is not much detailing in it, and it is mostly left to the Parliament to go into the nitty-gritties of citizenship. So, Citizenship Act 1955 is one of the major legislations that cover aspects of citizenship in India. So, the CAA of 2019 was essentially acting some parts of the CAA of 2019 was an attempt at amending some parts of the Citizenship Act 1955. So, what are the major aspects of CAA? The major aspect of CAA was it redefined who an illegal migrant is in India. It said that people from the Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, Jain, and Parsi communities from the countries of Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan who fled religious persecution there and were staying in India prior to 31st December 2014 will not be considered as illegal migrants. I'll repeat, the CAA essentially amends the definition of a illegal migrant. No longer will Hindu, Christian, Jain, Buddhist, Sikh, and Parsis who have fled religious persecution from the countries of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan and have been in India prior to 31st December 2014 will not be considered an illegal migrant. Moreover, such people would be eligible for Indian citizenship, and the period for gaining citizenship by naturalization has been reduced from 12 years to 6 years for such people. So, why has the CAA been enacted? The position taken by the government is that in countries such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, there is an official state religion, and in those countries, the minorities staying there are facing religious persecution. This is in contravention to the Liaquat Nehru Pact that was reached between the prime ministers of India and Pakistan in 1915, which ensured the rights of minorities. So, the government has taken the stand that the religious persecution faced by these minorities runs counter to the spirit of the Liaquat Nehru Pact. So, considering this, what are the reasons why this amendment has faced a lot of criticism? The major reason behind the protests that took place after the enactment of CAA is the fact that for the first time, religion is being used as a ground for granting citizenship. Also, by using religion as a ground for granting citizenship, it directly violates Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, which guarantees the right to equality. Also, questions have been raised on why these particular communities have been chosen, why these particular countries have been chosen, and why this particular cutoff date has been selected. Because it is unfair to say that only these communities face religious persecution in the mentioned countries. For instance, the Shias and Ahmadiyas in Afghanistan face religious persecution, and the Amendment Act makes no mention of such communities. The choice of countries is also being questioned because Afghanistan is not a country that was covered by the Liaquat Nehru Pact, and there are refugees from countries like Myanmar and Sri Lanka already in India, and questions have been raised as to why they have not been granted citizenship under the CAA. Also, the cutoff date has been questioned by groups in the Northeast because this is in direct contravention to the Assam Accord, which put the date of granting citizenship to migrants from illegal migrants from other country as 24th March 1971. So these are the major reasons why the amendment has been criticized by various groups. Another reason why the enactment of CAA brought in a large number of protests is because of the feeling of insecurity that it created in the mind of Muslims in the country in connection with NRC. So, what is the NRC? The NRC stands for the National Register of Citizens, that is, a register of all Indian citizens. According to an amendment made to the Citizenship Amendment Act in 1955 in 2003, the government of India should. So, why has the tabulation of such a register been questioned? At present, in India, the National Register of Citizens is not there in any state except for the state of Assam. In Assam, the National Register of Citizens was compiled as a result of the Assam Accord in 1985, following the Assam agitation of the 1970s. In Assam, the NRC was compiled as a result of a direction that was given by the Supreme Court. But apart from Assam, there is no record of any register of citizens in any other part of the country. And at the moment, the government has not said that it plans to roll out the National Register of Citizens. So why has NRC created much concern among the Muslim community? Because once a person from the Muslim community does not find a place in the NRC, they fear that they will be losing their citizenship, as opposed to other communities in India who have the possibility of getting citizenship through CAA. So this is how CAA and NRC is connected. This is the fear that is there in the minds of large number of people. Although the government has categorically denied that there is a link between the CAA and NRC. So what are the other issues related to NRC, even if we do not look at it from the prism of CAA? In India, it is difficult to prove one's citizenship because of the lack of a proper documentary culture among the people. Also, high levels of illiteracy would mean that the marginalized would be the people who are most likely to be left out when such an exercise is done. It also throws up the possibility of creating stateless people. So once people are judged to be foreigners by a foreigners tribunal, and they do not have the citizenship document of any other country, it results in a condition wherein a person does not have a state to call his home. So this is another major issue. And even if we were to conduct such an exercise, there arises a question of deportation. Where would the so-called foreigners under the NRC be sent to? In the absence of acceptance by other countries, they most definitely have to be lodged in detention centers. As of now, the Assam experience has shown that there are not enough detention centers, and the condition in detention centers is really problematic and deeply violative of human rights. So these are the main issues related to NRC, and questions have been raised as to whether it is proper to conduct such an exercise by spending large amount of economic resources when a large section of our population is against such an idea. So with that, we come to the conclusion of this particular topic. The next topic that we'll be looking at today is ASCI, the Advertising Standards Council of India. It was in the news recently because it has decided to issue guidelines for cryptocurrency exchanges. These are exchanges on which cryptocurrency transactions take place. We'll be looking at ASCI merely from a prelims. So, what is ASCI? ASCI is a voluntary organization that was established in the year of 1985. It acts as a self-regulating agency in the advertising industry and seeks to protect consumer interests. It is headquartered in Mumbai. So, what is the role of ASCI? So, ASCI has adopted a code for self-regulation in advertising back in 1985 itself. They seek to ensure that advertisements are truthful, protect consumer interests, do not breach acceptable standards of decency, are within the limits of fair competition, etc. Although the guidelines they issue are not legally enforceable, they do have a grievance redressal mechanism. ASCI has set up a consumer complaints council wherein consumers can lodge complaints about advertisements. The CCC, or the Consumer Complaints Council, looks into such consumer complaints, and after hearing the views of all the sides involved, they issue directions to the advertisers for voluntary removal or modification of advertisements. And it has been seen that most players in the advertising agency do pay heed to the directions given by ASCI. So ASCI is merely important from a prelims perspective, and so we can move to the next topic. The next topic is OPEC. OPEC stands for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. It was in the news recently because OPEC and other major oil producing countries, together known as the OPEC Plus, have reached a deal in order to step up the production of crude oil. The deal is expected to ramp up oil production around the world, as a result of which the price of crude oil will most likely fall. This will be of major relief to oil importing nations such as India, which has been hit by very high fuel prices and the consequent inflation. So, who are the members of OPEC? OPEC was founded in Baghdad in 1960 by. At present, OPEC is an organization of 13 major oil producing, oil exporting, developing nations that seek to coordinate and unify their petroleum policies. The other members, apart from the original five in OPEC at present, are Algeria, Angola, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Libya, Nigeria, and UAE. Formerly, Ecuador, Indonesia, and Qatar were also members. In the slide, there's a slight mistake wherein it is given that Ecuador, Indonesia, and UAE were the previous members. It should be corrected to Ecuador, Indonesia. The headquarters of OPEC is situated in the Austrian city of Vienna. It should be noted that the headquarters of the organization is in a country that is not member of the OPEC. Before moving on to the final topic, we also need to mention about Asian premium that is often talked about in the context of OPEC. Asian premium is the extra charge that is imposed on exports by OPEC to Asian countries as compared to their exports to Western countries. For instance, if the selling price of a particular quantity of oil by OPEC to a Western nation is X dollars, then the same quantity of oil is sold to an Asian country by OPEC at X plus whatever is charged as the Asian premium. This drives up the cost price of oil in Asian countries, in oil exporting Asian countries. So it has been a long-standing demand of India and China as well as other Asian countries which are import dependent on oil to completely phase out or at least reduce what is charged as Asian premium. Now we can move on to the final topic of the day, which is swing pricing. At the outset itself, I need to mention that this particular concept is not too important from a UPSC preparation perspective. A contestant is a candidate of UPSC examination is expected to know some elementary details about swing pricing, such as in what context the idea of swing pricing is being talked about recently. So SEBI has floated this concept of swing pricing for open-ended debt mutual funds, and that is why we have chosen that as a topic today. One need not go too deep into this particular news item, but they should be familiar of terms such as mutual funds, debt mutual funds, open-ended mutual funds, closed-ended mutual funds, equity mutual funds, etc., as well as have an elementary understanding of what swing pricing is. So, mutual fund is an investment scheme that pools money from many investors and invests in securities like bonds, stocks, and debentures. Mutual funds are usually classified into debt mutual funds, equity mutual funds, and hybrid mutual funds. Debt mutual funds are those mutual funds that invest in debt instruments like government and corporate bonds. They are also called as fixed income mutual funds. Equity mutual funds, on the other hand, are those mutual funds that invest in equity instruments like in the share market. Hybrid mutual funds are a combination of debt mutual funds and equity mutual funds, and they invest both in debt instruments as well as in equities. Another classification of mutual funds is to classify them into open-ended funds and closed-ended funds. Open-ended funds are those that continue perpetually once they are started. They allow investors to buy and sell mutual funds freely and don't have a fixed maturity period. On the other hand, a closed mutual fund is one that has a so they do not continue perpetually like an open-ended mutual fund. Finally, we should also talk a little bit about swing pricing. Swing pricing is an idea that is floated by SEBI and that would kick in during times of market stress or dislocation. During times of market stress, investors usually turn risk averse and thus some of them at least would want to exit the funds in which they are invested in. Swing prices imposes a cost on such an exit. As it increases the cost of exiting a scheme, it discourages large investors from sudden redemptions and can thus prevent hurried decisions during times of panic. So it is in order to stabilize the market that SEBI has started talking about this particular concept of swing pricing in the context of open-ended debt mutual funds. So with that, we come to the end of today's session. I would like to thank you for your patient